Okay, so this is the starting point and the middle point. This is what I think of the body today. So this is what the body is. It is reduced to the bare skin. There's nothing inside, and I will come back to this point. So I go back. Thank you. Right. Okay. So the conclusion. Just a moment. So the idea I would like to sort of prove is the following. The new body of the post-post age, whatever you call it, the new body is not reflected but constituted by digital media and digital space, in digital space. It finds reality as a milieu and not as something mediated by signs, whatever they were or are. The concept of reality as accessible through the senses, mediated by images and language or other signs as objects, is replaced by a concept of the real as movable space, a context for action. However, the real is not something that one can contemplate from a safe distance, as Kant said once of the sublime. It is a space into which one should intrude, one should enter to experience for what it is. One cannot withdraw into the reassuring confidence that the real, if it exists, exists in an inaccessible sphere. We have long passed the language paradigm, but I think we have also transcended the postmodern idea of heterogeneity of space. Discontinuity, heterogeneity, the fragmentariness of space is being constantly replaced by the concept of fluidity and continuity of internet space. The concept is exemplified in many elements of new media, such as the virtual camera movement, the merging of incompatible spaces, the modulation, the morphing of forms, shifting identities, and so forth. Whether it constitutes a new precarious, radical, or prosthetic aesthetics is yet to be determined. My hunch is that the real, if it exists as space to be created or as the referent of representation, cannot enter representation, cannot be discussed within it. One can contemplate Picasso's women, but it is highly dubious if we can contemplate the shaman's images of a journey that he is acting out. The fluidity of space forever eliminates every kind of safe distance, offering a kind of knowledge by acquaintance. By knowledge by acquaintance, in the paper I refer, this is a distinction made by the famous philosopher Bertrand Russell, knowledge by acquaintance versus knowledge by description. So, this is the idea. Now I start with two naive observations about reality, and now I enter the sort of philosophical talk. It has become a commonplace to say that the real withdrew from our sight with the arrival of the digital image. But was it ever in sight? Even at a cursory glance at the history of philosophy and the arts, we note that what is said to document the real as it is in fact bound to fail. Without going into the intriguing problematic of reference and meaning, we can break down the problem of the real into two observations, simple as they are. I think we can wholeheartedly embrace both. The first is the endorsement of the idea that we are living in a world that exists and not in the same fake version, of it, even though some digitalized word like matrix try to persuade us that we may be subject to a total illusion organized by some malevolent spirit very similar to the one invoked by Descartes in his meditations, who can easily deceive us into thinking that our heads are of glass. This is a very famous argument called the dream argument in Descartes, and I think it still holds. So there is no empirical and other evidence to prove that that we are existing in the real world. Although we know that there can be found no conclusive argument to prove the opposite, in most cases we seem to be quite at ease with the idea that what we see around us exists. There is a possibly stronger cognitive argument that we are not seduced into thinking that the world around us is real. It is that our actual body is interacting with real things in real space. We can eat an apple, have a headache, rush to the station, mothers give birth to children, and so forth. That is, we have a constant egocentric feedback from real things, so that action would not be possible with phantoms, illusions, and even simulations as they are. What we do experience in dreams, although we cannot make much of it while dreaming, is precisely the lack, is insufficient, or is the lack of sufficient egocentric feedback. We can do things in dreams without the egocentric feedback. That's the point. Second observation. The second observation in favor of the reality of the world is also a consequence of modern and contemporary medium theory. It says roughly that the world around us is always mediated by signs or images. But it also says that the images are two-faced. They are physical or external, and mental or internal. More precisely, they are ambivalent, oscillating between the two senses. The idea is a plain generalization of constructivism. Peculiarly, it can be derived from the positive philosophy of Bertrand Russell. He distinguished between knowledge by acquaintance and knowledge by description. The first includes direct awareness of sense data and of self-awareness. The second is knowing by means of language or other sign systems, that is, at a certain distance. The two forms of knowledge, however, do not simply contrast. Knowledge under or by some description may lead to direct experience if knowledge by description is understood as embodied by some subject. So here is the news vis-à-vis Russell, that we now talk about embodiment, and anything can be embodied if it is in language, if it is uttered, if it is seen, and so forth. Distance between the perceiving subject and the perceived object may dissolve or turn into the proximity of tactile sensation. Sight, which is the sensory modality keeping the greatest distance from the seen object, becomes haptic vision. Now, this is a very crucial change in my mind from the classical hierarchy of the senses introduced by Aristotle and Plato, which had almost 2,000 years of history until Jacques Derrida deconstructed it as a heliocentric concept of vision. And now we have haptic vision, that is, we have sight and the tactile sensation sort of combined. I will come back to the idea. Film viewing is a neat example. Although objects are experienced at a distance in a film, the experiential qualities are necessarily embodied by the viewer. Such embodiment may prove to be excessive. Here is an example. If certain Norwegian schoolgirls vomited when reading descriptions of the death camps, what could the images of those camps cause? The short film Silence, which is an animated documentary, substituted animation for direct images. For instance, it was first banned and later admitted in schools as a set film. Now the question arises, does it mean, let's have it here. Does it mean that animated documentary images are embodied to a lesser degree and seen from a distance with respect to realistic ones like this one? I will come back to it. The answer is the usual yes or no. Now I give two answers to this question. What happens documentaries if it is combined with animated images? This is, as I see it, this is now the strongest or the most dominant form in documentary filmmaking? Yes, the yes part, because the graphical form introduced by animation suppresses the photographical and prevents the viewer from spontaneously or even deliberately identifying with the character or getting immersed in the scene. So this is a very simple idea, but there is something interesting. It's called the Uncanny Valley. I contrasted, I'm not talking about this, but it's very closely related to what I'm saying. I'm saying that these are three conditions of the new media: immersiveness, interactivity, and bodily experience. These three conditions govern what we call today simulation. And within this line of argument, and it is contrasted with caricature, the art as caricature, which is also a very strong tendency in neuroaesthetics and neurology. Now this is a new thing. It was discovered or invented, or rather constructed, an algorithm constructed by a Hungarian guy doing PhD in Vienna, and it relates to the so-called Uncanny Valley effect in animation. The effect seems to prove the idea, the positive idea. In computer graphics, there is a so-called Uncanny Valley in the statistical representation of the relation between similarity and acceptance. That is, the more human a robot look like, the more users accept it as that. But in the similarity matrix, there is a point where the simulation, the CGI forms, are so close to the human form that people would find very frightening, disconcerting, or simply peculiar. The explanation goes that the smaller the difference between the robot and the human forms, the more unnatural they look to the viewers, so more frightening. Turning it around, we can say that the wider the difference between representation, think of caricatures, the less frightening and the more distantiated or the more distanced the representation becomes. In other words, high but not total similarity runs the risk of appearing unnatural, whereas caricature creates a distance that may remind us of both Kant's existential condition for the sublime and the Russian formalist idea of distantiation, ostranение in Russian. No wonder that separable subsurface scattering, which is the name of this algorithm, is so wanted and welcome in the field of animation, for lifelikeness or total illusion embraces immersiveness, encourages interactivity, and probably surpasses everything that mirror neurons can do, that is the embodiment part, so the three conditions I shown. So this is the SSSS4S, the abbreviation, and it's an algorithm which works with very simple video cards, they say, and produces a texture which is indistinguishable from textures in life, especially skin and leaves, so nature. But there is an equally convincing no to the question, and it goes as follows. It is that the graphical, or which is the same here, the haptic, more aptly generates synesthesia in the viewer than the photographically deceiving lifelike images. So there's a strong contrast in my mind. I just finished a book about this problem, so I focused on the haptic vision and tried to prove what Barker, Loremarx, and Sobchak and others argued in different respects, that haptic vision elicits a stronger sense of being there, a kind of proximity with the scene, a more intellectual sensitivity and sensuousness, even though the object being seen or contemplated is less clear-cut or obscure or downright lacking. Haptic vision, as I tried to show elsewhere, has a double structure. It is an ambiguous, even ambivalent feeling of closeness and distance at the same time. It's a kind of feeling the thing without getting to know its identity. As such, it may be likened to Benjamin's aura, the proximity of a thing far away, or a kind of recontextualizing the distancing effect of the Russian formalists. Vision is becoming radically tactile and deconstructing itself as the most objective sense for keeping things distant from itself. Synesthesia is literally both sight and touch. Now, this was the first part. I don't know how much time I have because...
Well, like 10 more minutes.
10, okay.
Like the max.
Okay, so that means I don't have any time, okay? So, okay. So, this is the second, and this is actually the major part of the paper, where I enlist 7 categories of the real and the body. So, real as embodiment. Now, since I haven't got that much time, I will not go through each, okay? So, I enlisted them here. So, the first conception of realism is that it is a style or technique. It's a way of describing things, and in order to describe things, we need the medium. Now, the medium, which can be prosthetic, which is prosthetic, from the blind man's stick, white stick, so to 3D simulation. So, in modern terminology, the medium affords description, or it affords a knowledge of acquaintance by means of a knowledge of description. Thus, a computer-facilitated domain of affordances appear. Such mediums are called prostheses, which extends our evolutionary accomplished sensory interface with the world. The next step is the Air Gothic Function, which is a term introduced by Mark D. Hansen. And he has a very unorthodox conception of space, saying that space is not something given, but it is something that is created by the subject within the subject. So it's a virtual space, but virtual space is not a given, but a result of action, and that's, he calls ergodic. The subject has this ergodic function to create space. Of course, he starts with Merleau-Ponty, and Merleau-Ponty's idea that the subject equals the possibility of action. So this is the famous I can, what I can do, and the crucial idea, I'm skipping here the details, the crucial idea is what Hansen calls excess. The excess here is the virtual, actually. The virtual, which in Merleau-Ponty, it's the potential, so, or the latency, which is not actualized, but it's there. It's like an unseen aspect of the thing, which could be seen, but it's not being seen. So that's the original idea, and it's turned into this ergodic concept of space, and it's an excess because it's excess vis-a-vis reality, but it's also a blind spot, and that's a very, I think that's a very important idea here. Blind spot in the Wittgensteinian sense. So we see, but we do not see that we see. We do not see our eyes that sees. And it's this blind spot which becomes, that's the fifth, which becomes the other, and this is almost like the Lacanian other. So this is the excess becomes difference, becomes what is actually the other of the subject. And the last but one change in the series of ideas, as I enlisted it, is the body aggregate. The body aggregate means that the separation between the body, between the subject body or embodiment of the bodily subject and the environment in which it is embedded actually starts to dissolve. So the body dissolves into the environment. Now that's the skin idea. That's why I showed this clip, because I think, and I finished another paper on the body conception, today's contemporary body conception, which I opposed to the body conception described by Foucault and many others, where the body is actually the obese, the abject by Christopher. So the body is something disgusting, so that's something that has been excluded from discourse. It's the other of discourse. But now I think there's more and more signs that the body has nothing inside. The body is the bare skin that you can skin the body, and there's nothing disgusting in the body. Actually, this film, although I said it's not a good film, but it focuses on the emptiness of the body as a body. So is a body as a mere skin still a body? Okay, so I think I told almost everything except the last idea, which was the conclusion that if we take reality and embodiment in this sense, in this new digitalized sense, in this new Air Gothic sense, then what we have is the exact opposite of what Agnes was talking about. I mean, it's the big question is that if space is acted out, if space is created of action, then we do not have the distance. If we do not have the distance, we cannot contemplate it. So if we cannot contemplate it, then dotted lines. Thank you very much for your attention.